great job. As we load up my presentation, I wanted to ask, how many of you are new today who weren't here yesterday? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3. Okay, most of you were here yesterday as well, so I don't have to cover off new material too much. Can you all see that? Yep. How many of you have internet access or a smartphone you can get to via your computer? There's a URL, just go sgroup.com/poll. There's 4 questions. And I can do it with a show of hands, but let's use the technology if we could. Basically it's 4 questions about, what organization you represent, what are the challenges you have, and actually we'll go to the poll results during the presentation. Hopefully the technology actually works. That's always the thing, isn't it? So I'll just take a minute or 2 for that. Is that working for everybody? Good. Excellent. So everyone done with that? I'll jump into the agenda. Or maybe I'll just wait a minute longer. Two people done. Any more done? Oh, let's just jump into this now. Okay, in terms of agenda, we've got an hour or 50 minutes right now, a short break, and then another 50 minutes. I don't want to be talking the whole time. I think we had a good session yesterday. We walked through some of the fundamentals. What I wanted to do today is focus on some of the key aspects about why economic development is not automatic when you have broadband. Then get into some of the challenges, which is the first set of poll questions that I want to review. And then what has worked. Because this is supposed to be a practical seminar about how to actually accelerate that process, to take those steps. And then really the focus of this is really to have you work on some of the questions. Really action planning for economic development through broadband based on your issues that you have. And that's going to take, we're going to spend about 40, maybe 50 minutes on that, depending on how that goes. Have a discussion and then get into some of the tools and resources that are available to help you through that process in your community, in your region. So let me just see if that's working. Yeah, the agenda's showing up. Okay. So, I'm not going to review some of those things that we covered yesterday because I think most of the people here, there's a few more. But essentially, the work that we're doing is based on a tremendous data set of information. We've got over 70,000 records from how individual businesses, organizations, and households are connected, using, and benefiting from the internet and those online applications. And with that, we have seen some patterns. And I'm going to share some of those things with you so that we can help better understand, what can we do, where should we be focusing our efforts and resources. Because, similar to you, we've worked with, a lot of, governments at a local, regional, and state level to address, these very issues that they're facing. So, you saw this yesterday, and just, we start off with this, here, right up front. Broadband has significant impacts. We know this, that's why we're here, but here's the data to show it. It's been growing. The businesses that are not participating, not doing those things online that they could and should be doing, they're falling behind. Those communities that are helping, those businesses, they're seeing those impacts on jobs. And for anybody that wants to have this data, I'll make the slides available through the SWORD, through Jared and Kevin. They can share that with you. But I really want to focus on some of the things that we find when we're doing this work. And this is across the board. Between utilization and speed, I'm not showing up for you because on this computer, it's not in the presentation. Oh, it's not showing up. I'm glad I checked. So I was talking about all these jobs and you weren't seeing it.
There's a metaphor there.
Yeah. Let's go. Show this presentation there. Kevin, thank you. Working. Thank you. So, there's a couple challenges that I've seen over the last, I've been doing this since 95. And even in the mid and late 90s, people knew broadband was good. The question that I had as an economist, I think I mentioned this yesterday, is how good is it? How can we, thank you, there you go, here's the job. How can we show the extent to which this is impacting the local economy so that we can justify these kind of investments? And these kind of job numbers really hit that home. So we want those public officials to have this. And I've had situations where fiber to the home or the broadband community, someone said, listen, we really thank you for that information tonight. I didn't give you anything. Well, they took our slides, presented it to council. This was in the Panhandle of Florida, and said that actually convinced them to say, yeah, we'll put that money aside to connect this area. We got them connected, and then these, I don't know how many businesses that they were able to help with that, and here's the growth from that, and that's fantastic. And so we want to share that information to help move that process along more quickly, because we know it's good. We need to show those people who don't understand yet what it means so that we can invest in this. Because if you just talk about the cost of this, it's a big leap of faith and political capital as well as financial capital to make these things happen. So, one of the things that we want to, I talked about this yesterday when I mentioned Chattanooga. Just because you have that network, a gigabit network, fantastic. It opens up the door to so many things. You are future-proofing your community or region when you have that kind of network capability. But just because you have it doesn't mean you're using it to its full potential. Now, there's a lot of lines here. The blue line is the speed. The download speed, upload speed, which is the green. For us, that's the biggest correlation between the economic benefits. Because you're actually participating. You're not just consuming information, or you're actually producing, sharing information, online services and so forth. The gold is the level of utilization. And to me, what's surprising in this chart is, these people who are on those fiber networks, they're not that much higher than those people on the cable or the other types of technology. The technology is an enabler, but what you're doing with it, that's the challenge. And that's where for us, where we see the biggest gaps. So even with lousy broadband, there's more that most businesses could and should be doing. Once you get better broadband, oh my goodness, it makes it less painful. It opens up the door to new possibilities. But let's get the use. And so Chattanooga, as I mentioned yesterday, for those who were not here, they're the poster child of gigabit. It's fantastic what they've been able to accomplish and turn around the community. They've invested a lot of financial and political capital. And when we did the state of Tennessee earlier this year, no surprise that there's speeds, because we have speed tests incorporated in our assessment for individual businesses, organizations, and households. Their speeds were top of the state. No surprise. I mean, there's some other places, Knoxville and Jackson, that also have fiber. But the level of utilization was only 2% above the state average for those 131 businesses that took our assessment. That to me was a surprise. And that to me is also an opportunity for them, because they've already got the infrastructure. Now let's help them understand how to use it.
Michael, how do you measure utilization?
Good question.
It's his question. I'm just asking him. I asked him first. I'm just a relay guy.
I'm glad. Please, let's make this interactive today, because this is supposed to be a practical seminar. So, utilization. What we do is we track, when we measure that, it takes about 20 to 25 minutes to take this survey. We call it an assessment because it's 20 to 25 minutes. But it's, how are you connected? What is the actual technology? Is it cable, DSL, wireless, or fiber, or satellite? We're agnostic to the technology and vendor neutral. And we also have a speed test in that. We measure, what are you doing with that connection? And there's 17 applications that we track across all industry sectors. From the basic things like doing email, surfing the web, buying online, document transfer. So most people are doing that automatically, as soon as they get online. But then getting into things such as, are you selling online? Are you using social media? Are you delivering those goods and services online? Are you customer service and support, which is through this platform, through this technology, audiences not just across that community, across the state, across the country, worldwide. How do you connect with them? How do you help them understand? Because if you're not online, you're not being found. And one of the slides from yesterday, we showed those who are at the top level of utilization, those scores. It's a score between 1 and 10 to make it easier for people. There's 17 that we track. Those that are at the top, 8 and above, they represent 25% of the businesses. But they are generating 75% of the new revenues because of online activities. So those below 8 represent 75% of businesses, only 25% of the revenues. How do we help them is to focus that on? Because those who are doing great, fantastic. Let's showcase what they're doing to the rest of the community so they understand. But those people who don't know what they don't know, that's for us the biggest challenge. And this slide sort of speaks to that. But before I jump to that, does that answer your question?
Just one more follow-up. What do you consider a 10? What type of activity, what application would that business be doing? Would they be totally online?
They'd be doing all 17. They check those things off. All those 17 applications. And I can actually share with you what those are. Maybe it's a follow-on to this. So I'll make this presentation available, and also share I'll add a slide about what those applications are. That'd be helpful.
Thank you.
Does that help? Okay. Does anyone else have any questions before I move on? Okay. So the challenge that we keep seeing, this is across all the states that we see, and we've been tracking this type of information since the early 2000s. The data that we're using here is from since 2012 to 2016, and there's over 20,400 businesses that have taken this. And the smaller the business, the lower their utilization. And that kind of intuitively makes sense, because they don't have the resources to hire an IT person necessarily, especially if you're a mom and pop shop. They're doing everything. The businesses that, we've seen since 2012, a real turnaround, where the larger businesses started getting it. They started hiring those IT staff. They even had an IT director. And they're now driving that change internally. They understand what the social media means, how we deliver those goods and services online. It's not just about taking a picture, putting up a description of your service. There's fulfillment behind it. There's processing, all these things. That takes time. And first of all, you need to understand that you can do this. And so the small businesses don't have the resources. And to us, that's where some of the biggest gaps are.
So you just mentioned large businesses hiring IT directors, but how can you get in the game if you're a small business and you don't have that kind of budget? Is it possible to get a high school student in there to help you get started?
You know, you've been jumping ahead of the agenda, so
sorry.
excellent questions. I love the tee-ups. I think there's a process there that we go through. I want to get to that later because that's part of the presentation, but I want to first set up what the gaps are that we're seeing, and then start addressing what the solutions are. But that's absolutely some of that. Because if you're a small business, you can't hire those local IT firms if they get have even the local in the rural area. And we've seen, I work in areas where, I was in Chinook, Kansas. They were going to build a $19 million fiber network to connect everybody in the community of 9,000. Wow. In the middle of nowhere, they realized that was a vision. And when we did our program, it's a small business growth program that we do this. It's just take this assessment, you get a scorecard back to understand what the ROI of having a website is. And the businesses go, well, okay, I need a website, but who can help me? And they were just, well, there's no technology vendors locally. So Ruth, she does that. I feel the woman's saying, she does it in meetings after work. So what are the solutions there? And that's what I want to work on in the workshop section of this. How do you address the gaps? But let's first, as Roberto so nicely framed out yesterday, what are the challenges? Let's define what they are, what we see. And then, once we're agreed on what those are, so small businesses don't have the resources to hire the IT people. We'll go into some of those challenges, but that's a pattern across the board. And no surprise, between urban and rural, the more rural you are, the bigger the gaps are in the level of utilization. You don't have those networks of people that you can tap into. You don't have those stores where you can go in and listen, I want to just get some voice over IP. What can I do here? Best Buy, expertise and at a very basic level, or those networking opportunities. Again, across the board, it's a pattern. And there's over 23,000 businesses that we're drawing from. So some significant patterns. This is troubling because small businesses have so much to gain. They have so much growth opportunity to reach new customers. In terms of the percentage revenues that they're attributing to internet, over 55%. So real growth opportunities for them. And cost savings as well. So I'm going to actually introduce someone who I've worked with in Minnesota. Matt Schmidt, he's a former state senator, who was instrumental in moving things broadband forward. Why I want him to come up here is to really start, if these are the patterns, if these are the gaps that we're seeing, what can we do about it? Because if I'm a small community or a region, especially in the rural area, we don't have much money. And obviously, everyone wants better broadband. But if you can only pull together 50 or 100 or even 200K to do something, you're not going to build much of a network. So what do we do? What can we do? With those limited funds, with those resources. Matt's been instrumental in doing some things. We'll talk about what happened in Minnesota. But with these kinds of gaps, the point that I'm making is, if we can help businesses better understand what they could and should be doing online, not only will it help retain and expand what they're doing, which is important to the local economy, solidifies and hopefully expands the tax base, but it also grows the market for those broadband service providers. Because the challenge that they have is, you're asking us to invest millions in connecting this area. Well, if I'm only going to get 18 or 22% or whatever that number is of people connecting, that's not a business case for me. And so they don't go in. So we need public investment. Well, that's a huge amount of money. In Kentucky Wired, I think it's a great project to get into the community. But that last mile is the big challenge. But if we help those businesses better understand, and I focus on businesses because that's the foundation, that's the core economic foundation of the community. We talked about that yesterday. Mark talked about that yesterday. If we can help them understand what they could and should be doing, even with lousy broadband, there's more that they can do. And that helps them grow. Now that retains them, helps build the tax base. But more importantly to the providers, it raises awareness of what's possible. So instead of 22% take rate, which the providers look at, will be north of 30, maybe even 40%, which changes the business case for investing. oh, we've got now this awareness. I showed you, active demand versus latent demand versus potential demand. Latent demand is if you offer better broadband, they'll sign up. Potential demand is they don't know what they don't know. But once you show them what they could and should be doing online and what the return is, and that's the key thing. And I think Roberto really touched on it well. If the owner doesn't get it, how that works and all that, maybe one of their staff does, and they can drive it. But at least that they agree that I need to do these things. Once you have them understanding, now we're talking about higher take rates, which makes it financially feasible for those investments. To illustrate and talk about that a bit more, I want Matt Schmidt to talk about that a bit. So Matt, welcome, and thanks for coming down from Minnesota last night.
I was a joke here about flying in from Minnesota, and boy, I'm tired, but it's a pleasure to be down here. And if you're feeling like it's cold, I'll tell you it's negative 15 back home in Minnesota this morning, so it's all relative, I guess. But I've known Michael for years now. We're both very passionate about broadband, and I guess before I get into it, I just want to give you a little bit of background. I'm from a town called Red Wing, Minnesota. If anyone's heard of it, Red Wing Shoes. All right, it's a beautiful town in southeastern Minnesota on the Mississippi River. And as I'm driving into town here this morning, I realized, wow, this really looks familiar. We've got a lot of bluffs, we've got karst topography. A lot of the challenges that you have, I think, here in terms of connecting to rural communities, being part of the 21st century economy. Believe it or not, an hour away from Minneapolis, St. Paul, also an hour away from Rochester, the home of Mayo Clinic, we have these same sorts of problems. And so I have to tell you, I've worn many hats over the years. First, as a consultant, I was working on broadband projects 10 years ago, helping to get communities connected through federal infrastructure opportunities. I got that political bug and I ran for office, and please don't hold that against me now. I'm a recovering politician, so please don't hold that against me.
He's a good one.
Oh, all right. And I have to tell you, and I also do some teaching at the University of Minnesota. Economic competitiveness is a passion of mine. Broadband connectivity is a passion. If there's a theme in the work I've done, though, it's rural competitiveness. Making sure that we, in rural Minnesota, rural Kentucky, rural America, can compete with our large cities and the rest of the world. And so I really view broadband access as the great equalizer for rural America. And so I think that we've honed in on the right issues to talk about. The question is, all right, how do we get from point A to point B? And just real quick, I'll tell you a little bit of what we've done in Minnesota and why I think what you're doing here in Kentucky is so darn important. I guess it begins about 4 or 5 years ago, and we wanted to elevate the issue of broadband on the state agenda. And so we got a listening tour together, and we drove around Minnesota in the depth of winter. And I got to tell you, I don't know what we were thinking, but it was January, and we drove up to Park Rapids, which is in northern Minnesota. And the governor had canceled school for the day because it was so darn cold. I think like negative 30. But I have to tell you, 50 people showed up at 8 a.m. to talk about broadband and how important the connectivity and the access is to competing in rural Minnesota in that case. And we had one listening session after the next. And what we were able to do is translate a lot of those ideas into action at the state legislature. We created an infrastructure fund. And we've invested about $70 million connecting over 20,000 homes and businesses and anchor institutions like hospitals and libraries and schools. And one thing that we've learned along the way here is, infrastructure and access is really, really important. You can look at those as maybe being two legs of a stool. You have to have the technology. You have to have it in a way that's affordable and it can reach everybody. So those are two on broadband and competitiveness in rural parts of the country. And so I didn't want to talk too much here today. I had asked Michael if I could tag along because I'm really passionate about this issue, and I want to learn more about what communities and regions around the country are doing in this regard. There's a lot of really good work to do, but I think there's a lot of great opportunity for us, and we're talking about the right thing this morning. And so a couple points of emphasis I can say, though, is
75 million, and then what the actual...
In Minnesota, so we had about $75 million of investment. I had mentioned, that connect about over 20,000 homes, businesses, and community anchor institutions. I just want to emphasize the fact, though, that happened not because of some legislator who said, hey, the state's got a solution for you. It's because there was great local and regional energy that was ready, that was ripe to take advantage of that kind of opportunity. And so that's why it's important for us to organize at the local and regional levels. In a lot of communities, particularly small rural communities, you can't do it alone. But if you band together and you talk about your challenges and the opportunities you have for working together, that's how I think that we can really drive change. And so I think, the emphasis I think today is on utilization and what we can do with what we have, how we can drive demand, how we can make the case to continue to make investments and play off of the strength that we may have, and perhaps play off of the strength that we can build in the future. And so those are a couple of points that I really want to emphasize. Is this is where the action is at. Rooms like this around the country. And the more folks that you can bring into the conversation, the more specific you can get with what you want to do, with what you're striving for, and what you have. I think that's how you can turn the page and really make your community and your region competitive.
Just one quick question.
Oh, geez, sure.
In rural Minnesota, what has driven utilization rates up most successfully? What has worked best?
Yeah, I have to tell you, this is the great question, because different parts of the state have different stories. I'll speak to a couple of examples, and these are by no means the only examples. But I think in my home area of Red Wing, beautiful part of the state, we've got bluffs, we've got the river. Within an hour's drive of major metropolitan areas, tourism is a big deal. And so making sure that, and it sounds like, hey, not a big deal, it's tourism, right? It's a big deal. And for the small businesses, and whether they're guides for getting out in the river or walking in the woods or doing anything under the sun, you got to have that online presence. And we accept this as a given, but I got to tell you, for so many businesses around the country, it's not a given. And having that basic web presence and being able to interact and sell what you have and spread the word is so important. And that's true in much of the northern part of our state, where you have all those 10,000 lakes that you may know about. A lot of opportunities for tourism. Just a couple examples. Another example, though, that I think you touched upon yesterday, and I think this is the wave of the future in terms of economic development in rural areas, is the opportunity for teleworking, for flex schedules, for tapping into that demand that the younger generation of workers want, that balance between work and life. Being able to take advantage of technology to work smarter. Not just harder, but smarter. And I think this is definitely true throughout Minnesota, throughout rural America, is that when you have technology and you have the access and you're utilizing it for entrepreneurialism, whether it's on a main street or your spare bedroom or your garage at home, that's where you're going to see a lot of innovation and job creation. That spare bedroom could turn into a downtown Main Street business presence employing 20, 30, 40, 50 people. And so the telework component is a big deal. In Red Wing, we live about 50 miles away from Mayo Clinic. You guys have heard of Mayo Clinic? They have a promise with their Destination Medical Center investment of adding 30,000 new jobs in the next 20 years. Now, I'm always a skeptic. I say, okay, we'll see how many of those jobs actually materialize. But even if it's 3,000 new jobs, a lot of these jobs are not going to be based in Rochester, a regional economic hub. They're going to be based in people's homes, living on the farm, living in their rural community, living amongst the bluffs or the mountains, as you'd see in Red Wing or you'd see in eastern Kentucky. And so I think those are just a couple examples of what we've seen drive the demand for utilization. And we could go on and on about it, and I'm sorry if I've already spoken too much, but I think getting specific is a real important aspect of this, and different parts of any region or state are going to have different strengths to play off of.
Can I just jump in quickly?
Please.
In Mississippi, small towns, typically what has driven adoption is when kids have online homework.
Yeah.
So if your school is planning on doing that, that's what I've seen when parents go, okay, I'm fed up, we've got to work this out. So having children, that. And then for grandparents, typically what I sell it as is, look, you can Skype and FaceTime with your grandkids, and they will more than likely visit if you have a faster internet connection. Oversimplifying, of course, but it's those small things that really, very small towns, that's what I've seen in Mississippi.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. Maybe just, if I could just cap that off. We talk about, business growth in telework. We talk about distance learning and how important that is, whether you're, in elementary school and you're taking advantage of flip schedules, or you're trying to, learn in new ways in the K-12 setting, or if you're an adult and you want to improve your skills. So many opportunities in education. And then you get into precision agriculture, is something that's a really important opportunity for us in Minnesota and throughout much of the country, where you have great, rich agriculture traditions. So you look at economic development, you look at education, healthcare, agriculture. Those are the big pots that I think drive utilization moving forward. Michael, I think I've run out of time, but thanks for the chance to join me. I'm going to be listening a lot today, and I hope to have one-on-one conversations with many of you. So thanks.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Matt. Being a modest Minnesotan, he didn't say how instrumental he was in getting that, first 20 million and then getting up to 75 million allocated in the state legislature for broadband. And so he has a lot of hands-on ground experience working with folks and making that happen. And he'll be, during the workshop phase, roving around with us to work with you. Roberto, you mentioned, some of those adoption strategies. To me, when I look at the checklist, that you provide, that community checklist, to me, it's almost like an opportunity assessment for broadband. And I think, and that's what I really want to focus on, the rest of the time we have today. It's, what are the opportunities? What are the challenges you have? What are the opportunities you have around that? And that is a local an issue that's going to be solved as folks at the RC is more at a regional level, because you need that capacity and those resources to deal with it. Most local counties and communities don't have those resources, but when you band together, you can pool those resources and make something happen. So we'll be talking about that. But first, I wanted to get to, Kevin, you could toggle over for me. The poll results that we had. I just blue screen right now. Okay. So, thank you for participating in this. And in terms of the organizations, over half of you are either with an economic development agency or a local government. The others, who mentioned others, please? Maybe you can share with me where you're from and what organization you represent.
Grassroots cultural and media organization working on economic development through cultural vitality and solidarity.
Interesting. And where are you based?
At Whitesburg, the Apple Shop.
Okay. Someone else raised their hand over here?
Education, higher education.
Okay.
At the University of Kentucky.
Okay.
We're based in Breathitt County.
Okay.
I work at one of the agricultural substations.
Are you an extension?
I don't have an extension appointment, but yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
No, I'm sorry, Mr.
Roberto's
Chairman.
going woo-woo because he's an extension. Yes.
I'm with a nonprofit. So I'm actually in Tennessee. It's called Community Economic Development Network of East Tennessee.
Okay.
And we have a rural broadband campaign.
Great. Thank you. So, the right people I think are in the room here. We can just toggle to the next tab. In terms of where you're at in this process, and most of you are in developing the plans, and you've hit other as well. To me, I think it's great to see the technology actually working, so yay. But two, it helps with this discussion. So I'm going to go again to the other. There's a significant amount of you that said other. Maybe I can go up, show hands again. What are those other issues that you come across that you're dealing with, for those who mentioned other?
I mentioned other, but in relation to determine the schedule of Kentucky Connect and when our community will be connected.
The Connected Wire project, absolutely, yeah. Anyone else on the other? Did somebody hit other mistakenly many times?
No, we used it in a more broadband set. That's a play on words, but still, I think that we are looking at it as not a definite other, but we probably
These don't capture all of us.
other things, yes.
Right. Yeah, because I think, I've been...
Because that was the issue that we have is when is broadband going to be where we're expecting it to be? We already see lines coming in from another company, and but they're still, they too are going to be waiting on that hub.
Right. And I think a question that was said to me by one of the AEDs, he says, we know it's coming, when, but also what are we going to do with it? And I think that's really the key thing here. What is it going to mean to our community? And then finally, the last question, if you could just scroll to the top, if you would mind, Kevin, so we see it. What are the challenges that you're facing? And I thought, it's good to have that feedback to see, how in sync are you with the rest of the room today. But, local leadership is a challenge. A lot of things here. The main one is financing the costs. Where do we get the money? And what's interesting about that is I'm working with a group where we're trying to, instead of the sort of traditional approach is do a feasibility study and then say, can we do this or not? Well, if the carriers aren't in there already, there ain't no business case. So you're going to need some kind of public investment to get there. But if you only treat it as a business case, that's a real challenge. I mean, roads, what's the business case for roads? What's the business case for electricity, for water and sewer? If we look at broadband as the fourth utility, then it's not a question of when. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when and how. And electrical utilities are well positioned to do that. They are used to long-term financing. Another thing these guys point out to me, because they do the engineering. I'm just an economist. They do the engineering design and the financing of these things. But they're saying, you're already paying for it already. Why don't you pull that resource instead of having, a highway designated for FedEx, another highway built specifically for UPS. Why don't you pool those resources? You're paying for it already. And that's possible now with the technology, solutions there. But we need to get those people understanding out of those silos, but we need to pool this to get this happening. Because roads were built in the last century for the industrial economy. This is the information economy, more and more so. And if you don't have this, you're going to be left out. Roberto, highlighted the digital divide yesterday.
Michael? About that.
All the anchor institutions, schools, hospitals, education, the individual businesses you're paying for.
They're already paying for it.
They're already paying for internet in their own way.
Sure.
How do we take all that that's being already paid and pool that together so that we can get access in a ubiquitous way and an affordable way to those people? Because if you're not online, you're not participating and you're being left behind. And that's a growing digital divide. I showed that chart yesterday, and I mentioned it already this morning. 25% of the businesses are generating 75% of the revenues. More and more, it's important to the revenues. That means 75% are being left behind. Not just businesses. There's households which are accessing those services, and that's quality of life. So how do we address that? So what I want to toggle back now. So thank everyone for participating. There's another poll result we'll get into the next workshop is addressing the question, what are the challenges? I guess it's got a render still not showing up the presentation. What I want to do is spend 10 minutes sort of in a group, 10 or 15 folks. Don't want it too big, but it's going to be sort of a group discussing what are the challenges that you face. Now, we thought about, do we do it by theme, by stage in the planning process or the life cycle of this, or based on the challenges there. But really, what we're going to do, and I actually ask Kevin to help with this, group you by geography, by the community, by the region that you're located in. Because at the end of the day, the solutions that you find that you're going to have to implement are going to be based on working with people in your area. Yeah, there's going to be themes, but it's mainly going to be geography. So I'm going to hand over the mic, and Kevin knows this area much better than I, to get you in groups. We're going to have these groups not only for this in the next 10 minutes, but also in the second part of the workshop part, to address some of the other questions that I'll have for you. So I'd like you to take 10 minutes, have someone take the notes, and then I'll call upon you to give us the top 2 or 3 challenges that you have and share those with that.
Yeah, thank you. So if you guys just want to get back into the same groups you got in yesterday to work on the checklist, I know we've got a huge group from Pikeville, Prestonsburg, Hazard, Moorhead. So if you guys just want to get into those same groups, that out-of-state group, same thing we did yesterday with the checklist, get together in groups and come up with these challenges, and then we'll come back in about 10, 15 minutes to go over that. Thank you.
Kevin, real quickly, for those...
This is a quote-unquote business case. I call it an economic case for the community because there's a whole bunch of things, as I showed yesterday, that are off balance sheet to those private sector providers. But they're community benefits. That's why we consider it the public good and the fourth utility. And so, helping people understand what the value of this is, I talked about this yesterday, personalizing the benefits. And you really have to start with the businesses. Households get the benefits. If you have kids, as Roberto said, that's a great aid. Doing their homework online. But then the gaming and Netflix, okay? That's a huge driver. Is there much value creation in that? No. It's recreation. I don't think you can justify public investment of those kinds of connectivity. But helping the local businesses stay and grow, yeah, absolutely. How do we encourage that? And to do that, you've got to show them what this ROI is. You've got to personalize that ROI to that individual business, because as I showed in those previous charts, they don't know what they don't know. They don't have the time. I have some breakdown of those numbers, but they don't have the time or understanding of what meaningful use means for them. $5,000 for a website? I can't afford that. That's too much. Oh, and you show them that it's $90,000 in new revenues that their peers from their industry sector of their size are generating on average. Well, that changes the game, doesn't it? That's a good investment return. So if you can show them what that is, how to use it, and then help them develop a business case around that, you are now helping them take that step. And that impacts the actual business case for the private sector provider. And what do I mean by that? Well, all these applications, Larry Combs had asked, what are some of the applications that we track, those e-solutions that we call? And there are things, these are a subset of those. There are things that are quick to adopt. Let's call it laissez-faire. People will buy online, have a basic website, research and access information on their own. And even at a low level of utilization, on a score of 4 on a scale of 1 to 10, 80% are doing these things in the blue column. The slow to adopt, selling online. It's more than just putting up a picture and a description on the web. Online media. Teleworking. Teleworking is a cultural thing. Can you trust that person that they're going to actually do their work when you don't see what they're doing? As you're walking by, that's a trust thing. Delivering those services and content online and social networking. Twitter. How does that help my business? It's not obvious, but it actually does. And here's the key thing. From our data, it's the green applications that have the biggest impact on revenues and cost savings. These take longer to understand what that means, and so that's where they need the help. Now we're starting to get into how, and this is, my thinking has evolved. I've been working on, this for 20 years, as I said yesterday. I don't feel that old, but apparently I am. But addressing these gaps that we've seen, I've been focusing on for the last decade. And it comes down to the same things over and over again, the same patterns. And so how do we help businesses, especially the small ones, especially in rural areas, understand, hey, these are the applications that will have the biggest impact on your bottom line, on your top line and your bottom line. How do we get in front of them to say, hey, I know you're busy. I know you're working 10, 12 hours a day. Here's some things that you could and should be doing to be competitive. And why is that important? To me, we developed this chart about 2 months ago. We pulled out the data from Tennessee. To me, this is the kicker. The goal is those businesses with a low DI score, under 8. And you can see, on average, it's just under 20%. For small businesses, 21.6% of their revenues are from online activities. Those businesses that have a score of 7, well, I have a reference, but 8 and up, their revenues are double that. So there's a payoff to helping those businesses do those things online. And so how do we engage in that process? If we know those are the challenges, how do we engage and who do we engage in that? Well, I consider it a 3-legged stool. First of all, the providers. You have a vested interest for those providers, and you talk to them, there's some in the room, I think, that you're trying to get people to sign up to your service, to that network, and that's the biggest challenge. They say, we can build that network, but if we're only getting an 18, 22, even 25% take rate, that doesn't make a business case for us. We can't make that case. But if we have them, work with economic development folks, and someone who's working on workforce, and to me, the UK step, I think it's a really interesting opportunity because the first thing that happens when you show a business, you could be making $90,000 a year, and here's what your peers are making. from having a website, and they go, oh, first question to ask is, who can help me? Those are job opportunities. Those are good paying, local, ongoing job opportunities. So you get a provider, instead of spending your, whatever it is, 15, 20 grand on traditional radio spots and billboards or advertising, participate in a program that's local to help businesses locally understand what this technology means. You're going to drive the take rates, plus you're going to give them value. And for them, the key things is higher revenue per user. Instead of buying the base package, which is what you see all the time because they don't know what the value is. $200 for a connection, I can't afford that. Cost in isolation is prohibitive. $5,000 for a website. If you don't understand the return, you're not going to invest. And we see that over and over. So when you show them the returns, hey, this is worth investing. And so for the providers, they're increasing their take rates, they're growing their market share, and they're retaining customers. Customer churn is a big thing. You're giving that customer something of value. They're going to say, hey, they helped us. And so that's the win there. So they should be part of this. For local economic development agencies, from the econometric analysis that we've done, when you increase utilization by 10%, so going from a 7.2 to an 8.2, the impacts on revenues are 24% on average, and the decrease in cost is 7%. That's pretty significant. Obviously, we have to get to the specifics for folks, but there are some significant gains to be realized. And so, in terms of the regional approach, the workforce approach, SOAR, SCED, KED, there are some real important factors here. You want the businesses to be more competitive. First of all, you want them to be found, because if they're online, they don't exist, and they're fading away to those people who are looking for those kinds of services or products. It creates a demand for higher skilled workers. We don't want those mixed jobs. We want those value-added jobs. We have a lot of creativity. Let's take advantage of that. They're very resourceful. I was talking to people who worked in the coal industry. Really resourceful people. They had to be. Why not leverage that? And with those higher skilled jobs are higher paying and ongoing job opportunities. And that also solidifies the tax base. That we keep them. We're growing the tax base. They're doing more. And finally, as per the previous slide, you're growing the markets for those service providers. They have not only better potential to keep those customers, but those customers understand much more what the value of this better broadband is. So they're signing up into those take rates, making that business case. So there's a number of wins here, but we need to prime the pump. So some of the things in terms of tips and tools to do this, understand first, how to assess the current broadband availability and what that demand is. What do people know? What are the gaps? I've shown you some data, from the states that we've collected. Here are the general patterns. At the end of the day, you want that data-driven, evidence-based approach to decision-making to your program. And it's based on what are your local needs here. Is it the same as this community over here? We work with a number of state broadband offices, and it's a tough job because, one side of Tennessee is different from the other side. There's some rural, mountainous areas, and then there's some flatland areas. Some needs are similar, but also quite different in what possibilities are to solve them. You want to have that regional approach because you have the opportunity to address those common needs with those resources and the capacity. Because one county and one community may not be able to have that person or those people to work on it. I love what SOAR has and SCED has available because they cover an area they can afford to have those people. They need more. They need more resources. So at least they're there and they need something. And you need to understand that demand at a micro level, the specifics of it. How can I help you business? What are the things that you could and should be doing online? So you work at that micro level and then help coordinate that at that community or regional level or county level or where you can. Identify those gaps, barriers, and opportunities for growth. And to me, once you have those identified, and that's what this next work session is going to be around, is When you have those gaps and challenges identified, now that's the basis for alignment. Who are the people that are working on those things? When we bridge those gaps and who benefits, that becomes, that foundation for aligning our interests. This is why we should work together. There's the win-win that we should be focusing on. But you need that micro-level data. And, I don't want to talk at a high level. I want to make this real pragmatic. In this community, these 50 businesses don't have websites. These 75 aren't using social media. All of them need an online marketing campaign to understand how to use Twitter, how to post things, and so forth. Those are all job opportunities. Who can step into it? Who in our community? Where are the resources for people that have one piece in that or a couple pieces in that value chain to help us? Let's get together and focus on bridging that. Design, of course, the network that meets that capability. The Kentucky Wire is going to be the anchor institutions, but that first mile or last mile, that's going to be the real challenge. But if we can get people understanding what the value is, hopefully we'll generate them more interest. There's also other models where we treat this as a fourth utility. So that's getting beyond the scope of what I'm expert in. There's other people who are expert in that. But how do we make it easier for those investors, for those things to happen? And it starts with that demand. And having that network that can use that. And then find out those tried and true ways, not only to help invest that time, and it's a process, and your stakeholders have to be involved in that. And it's learning as you go, but having those stakeholders available and with those resources to help them through that process. And so with that, I want to jump to the second session, the breakout session, which is some action planning. What can we do? Let's make this practical. We're going to use the same groups to focus on. And maybe, those Piper folks and those Prestonburg, Paintsville folks, we could separate you out a bit more. But really, it's what can you do? If you want to work together, that's great. But I really want to have some good discussion around some key points. And which is, can you see that all right in this chart? Well, it's a bit tight. But really, it's focused on economic development success through broadband. How do you achieve that? And there's 5 criteria. Resources, goals and vision, task, challenge, and success factors. This is something, we did this in Wisconsin with the extension folks there. This is actually the chart, as you can see. And it's hard for some people to read, so I'll read it for you. Step one, is how do we? It's economic development through broadband. That's real general. What specifically? So spend 5-10 minutes on that. We could spend like 2 hours on what that is. But let's short that at 5 to 10 minutes. And the first step is record the current resources we have to make a difference on this question, on that issue, on that challenge that you want to address. The second step here is clarify the goals based on the vision for the future. What are those SMART goals which are specific and time-bound? What can we practically, pragmatically do? And then third is identify the tasks that allow you to accomplish those goals. I can share a hard copy of this with people afterwards. What I want to do today is really have you start this process. As I said, it's a process. Apply some of these thoughts, have that discussion, so that when you get back to your desk, you've already gone through once, you've applied some of this, and it's going to feel more natural, and you can take some of it. But this is an ongoing process. But 3, identify the tasks that will allow you to accomplish those goals. 4, during your discussion, challenges that stand in your way will come up. What are they? And then 5, record what is working. What are those success factors, and how do we want to work together to make this happen? So it's now past the break that we're supposed to have. Should we want to take a quick break? And then when you come back, go to the same groups, and we'll spend half an hour on those things. And we'll roll around and support. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to haul out. But if we can be back here at 22 after, any good? All right. Thanks, everyone. This wrap, just a few words, as you said. And then I want to get into some of the responses that you provided as we lead into the workshop section. But I want to give us an update on the supply side of broadband in Kentucky.
Yeah, we're working on it. Thank you.
Hey, Larry, Glenn.
Yeah, so the one question is always a big one, isn't it? Yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Larry Combs with Central Development, working very closely with the Commonwealth on the Kentucky Wire Project. As many of you know, we had a delay of game because of the change in our state politics. That did cause about a 6 to 8 month delay in the project itself. What we're working on right now is trying to get all of the major route right-of-ways taken care of, getting easements done. So there are probably lawyers scouring documents in your courthouses as we speak. While that work is going on, properties that the Commonwealth already has title and easement to are currently getting installed. So a lot of your KCS campuses now have communication huts on them. State police posts, I believe we got pretty much all of those done. And we're going to be working on a lot of the courthouses and other governmental institutions as we go along and as weather permits. So the work that's being done right now is what we're kind of referring to as premise to curb. So we're going into facilities and we're tying out to the street. When we run the main trunk lines down, our crews will simply just be tying everything in. So as far as the main line, how much we have done, very little. Just a few miles in the Golden Triangle area. But how much of the project that we have done, we're making significant daily progress as a whole on the project. So timelines, let's talk about that for just a second. Again, I did mention there was a delay. Some of your communities we had originally scheduled that we'd be done by now. Obviously, we're not done by now. Kind of what we're looking at is rings 1A and 1B. So we've got the Golden Triangle, and then we've got the loop that runs from Lexington down to Somerset over to London, Manchester, Hyden, Hazard, Prestonsburg, Pikeville, and then on up to Ashland around to...
Don't forget Paintsville.
Going through Paintsville. And up around to Ashland, and then following over to Moorhead, to Winchester, back in Lexington, kind of closing that loop. So that's always been a priority, and the Congressman has made very clear to everyone concerned, as has the governor as well, that is the priority for construction activities. So that is the only place that we're doing the main line right now and trying to get all that squared away. We're actually looking for those to be completed, and please turn off the recorder at this time, by about this time next year. And we will be lighting up sections as we can, as the electronics dictate that we're able to. So some of you folks are actually going to have, this Kentucky Wire within your community, by this time next year. And then statewide, we're looking at the end of 2018, basically, to have everything completed and the entire network up and going. Now, with that said, I do want to really point out one thing, is that don't wait for this fiber to get to your community. If you wait until you see those trucks hanging fiber, you're 2 years behind. Okay? Trying to get through this process, before we could even put out an RFP, it took the center about 1.5 years of work just to get to that point. So you need to be working on these projects right now. Do not wait for this fiber to come into your neighborhood. These final mile projects, to get fiber, to get service out into these rural areas that no business would probably go, those are going to be viable projects even if Kentucky Wire never happened. Okay? Even if it never never happened, those would still be viable projects because you need to be able to get that access out into those communities, working with any kind of provider that can come in and give you access to the internet from a node site within your community. Okay, so Kentucky Wired is going to happen. It's going to happen a little bit behind schedule, but we are making progress. But again, do not delay, do not wait for Kentucky Wired to come through your neighborhood before you start. Otherwise, you waited way too long. Does that help? Does anybody have any questions that I probably can't answer?
So in terms of... and you do know where those nodes are in your community.
If you do not know where those nodes are, you need to call me, or you need to call Mike Hayden at the Commonwealth of Kentucky Communications Office and ask us. We can pretty well show you where those fiber lines are going to, and where those node sites, those sites of connectivity are going to be located at. But again, don't dismiss your local providers right now. If you got somebody in your county that's doing a good job, you need to be working with them as well. Hopefully we'll be choice number 2 or even number 3 as far as getting connectivity in and out of the community. But we don't want to be the only one. And as you may know from experience, having a single provider in a community, even if it's Kentucky Wired, is still not adequate. It will not work for large user businesses. They have to have a minimum of 2 providers.
So for updates, you're going to give your phone number?
I do have my cell number out there. But no, feel free to get a hold of me.
What's the best channel to find out besides the Campbell? Is there a website?
KCNA does have a website. So if you go to KentuckyWire.gov, you can get information. They try to keep it as updated as they can. But I can tell you that the build-out schedule that they do have online right now will indicate that some of your communities were completed 6 months ago. So don't go by the schedule that's posted.
Just a quick question. Net neutrality over the last couple of years has been something that's been discussed and debated and ultimately protected, but its future is uncertain. Will Kentucky Wired mitigate some of the offset that would be created if net neutrality were compromised, and then charging different tiers of service, different rates for how fast people can access the websites that we're encouraging everybody to do?
Kentucky Wired is going to be vendor agnostic. So half of the strands that we're deploying are going to be for the public good. So they're going to be Kentucky Commonwealth services. It's going to be higher education connectivity. It's going to be K-12. It's going to be public hospitals and that sort of thing. The other half of the fiber count, regardless of where it's going into, so it could be anywhere from 144 strands all the way down to 12. The other half of that is going to be available for economic development use. The plan right now that we're batting around is to offer up a very limited number of IRUs, so the companies that want to offer services statewide can do so. Are you pulling me? I'm answering a question. But to kind of cut to the chase on this one is that we cannot dictate to those companies who are potentially going to be using that fiber whether or not they can throttle back certain services or not. Our hope is that with that amount of fiber, that we'll have so many vendors that they'll pretty much have to in order to compete with each other. So I would hope that when you connect on Kentucky Wired 5 years from now, that the first thing you're going to see is a splash page. It's got 20 vendors to choose from as far as where you get your connectivity from. That would be my hope.
Thank you very much, Larry, for the update. And you have to leave shortly, I understand.
Yes.
So,
Somewhat.
good to see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to jump. We're running a bit behind here. There's lunch that's going to be served after you finish the workshop part. So I wanted, before we get into that, here are the responses to that fourth question you had. And the fourth question was, at what stage are the efforts to address broadband challenges in your community or region? What I found really interesting is that we have fully addressed our broadband needs. 0. No surprise there. Some of them have no planned action at this time, but the majority are, underway to address our broadband needs. Again, having a clear plan to get there, not a lot there, but actively evaluating is the number 2 one. So I thought that's some interesting feedback for all of you. Where you're at, how you all compare where you're at, and so forth. So in terms of the workshop, I think you're grouped, into your community or regional groups there. What I wanted to do now is get to those questions that I went over quickly before the break, and which is, if we're focusing on economic development through broadband, what specific question does your community or region want to address? You just have to scroll down there a few times to get down to the Goodman Academy further. And so, one, defining that question. Go back. There we go. What are the resources that you have? Goals and vision. I'll put up the chart again, but I just wanted you to have this. Thanks very much. Challenges and success factors. We are running a bit behind, so if you could take 5 minutes, define what that question is. How do we make it specific to your areas to achieve that? Goals and vision, tasks. So let's spend, let's skip till noon to finish that up. It's going to be 20 minutes, a lot shorter, so let's be right on task here. There's lunch waiting. And then we'll have some discussion. And again, I'd ask you, someone to be the secretary for that, and then share with us what you defined as I said, what you want to achieve, what are the resources and steps to get there, and have a review and discussion of that. All right? And we'll be roving around and answering questions. Thank you.